Hi everybody, this is a video to walk you through an activity that was done in the Week 2 workshop. It was unit planning practice, so I'm here under Learning Resources Week 2 and we're looking at the unit plan slides. So we talked about the purpose, the structure and audience of unit plans, and also one point to make is when we're teaching English, these are 3 points that we often look at when we're looking at any text. We look at the purpose of the text, the structure of the text, and the audience. So in terms of unit plans, the purpose of a unit plan is to provide an overview of what the unit is, so how it links to the curriculum, what should be taught in each lesson, not necessarily the how, not necessarily the resources that are used, but more just the skills and content that are to be taught across each lesson. And the unit plan will also describe what the assessment task is. The structure, we looked at the structure of unit plans quite a lot in the workshop, and also in the Week 2 activities there are lots of links to lots of different examples, but there are some generic things that we can see across all different types of unit plans. I'm just going to open a document. Okay, and I'll type a few things here. So unit plans, we're always going to have the unit name, the year level, the length of the unit. We're going to have a bit of a rationale, and that can look different across different unit plans. A unit description, sometimes they're in together. We've got what the assessment task is, the lesson overviews, and that will include things like the objectives, the content, the skills that are to be covered in a lesson. Sometimes at the end there'll be a section for reflection, so questions that the teacher can ask of themselves and the student in terms of how did the unit go, what went well, what could we change for next time. That's a really important part of teaching, is always reflecting on your units. I always think it's a nice idea as you go along to just make some notes about particular lessons and activities that you did. Just make a document on your computer and save it, and you can forward that to your head of department at the end of each unit. Just while I'm on that point, some teachers will do a little survey at the end of a unit using something like SurveyMonkey. They'll send a link out just with some basic questions about how they felt about the unit, how they felt they went, getting a bit of feedback after every unit of work. And then you can incorporate their feedback into any improvements or changes that you might make to the unit for the following year. The only other thing might be links to curriculum. Okay, so things like that are included in the unit plan. Okay, the structure, it's often in that table form that we've looked at and the kind of template that you'll use for your assessment. And the audience is usually for, obviously for teachers. Your heads of department and deputies and principal at your school will also want to see that. The work programs, like the one that you're using, the one on the assessment page. This one here, this big document when you get to year 11 and 12 has to be approved by the state governing curriculum body, but unit plans are just for the school's purpose. So what we're going to do is walk through an example of how to construct a unit plan. The purpose of this activity is to model to you what you will do for your assignment. When you start teaching, you generally won't be responsible for writing units of work. That should already be done. But in a school, there's always a process of tweaking and rewriting units, and it's important for you to know how your lessons fit into the bigger structure. Okay, so this is a unit of work that we're going to be doing the example from, okay? So it's a made-up unit, but one that could very likely be used in schools. So it's for Year 9 English. Okay, so the unit title is Representations of Family in Children's Picture Books. I'll give you a moment just to read the overview, assessment and the length. Okay, so we're looking at how families are represented in children's picture books, and we're taking a critical lens to that. For the assessment, the students can choose. They can either write a critical analysis of a picture book's representation of family, so they can do a critique of the picture book and say, does this picture book represent a dominant representation of families or an alternate representation of families? Or they can choose to transform the picture book and reveal the perspective of a silenced family member. It's a 5-week unit. So let's look at what we do when we plan a unit, and this is what you do for your assessment. So step 1, you make a list of the skills and content you want students to know at the end of the unit. Okay, not just the content, but the skills as well. So the skills might be linked to the assessment, like writing a critical analysis, how to transform a picture book. Okay, so you start by making a list. Let's make a few notes here. So skills and content to be taught in the unit. Okay, so there'd obviously be a lot of visual literacy going on because we're looking at picture books. You might teach the idea of symbolism, denotation and connotation. Have a think about what else you think could be taught in the unit. What about, you could teach a little bit about families and how we can represent families. We need to teach about dominant and alternate perspectives. We need to teach how to write persuasively. Persuasive writing, that's for the critical analysis. You'd need to teach a critical analysis structure. How to create, how to form arguments. Okay, those are just a few things. Your list could be quite extensive, okay, in terms of the skills and content that you would want your students to know. So that's step 1. You go through and you have a think, what would the students need to know in order to complete the assessment and to fulfill the unit description? So if the unit says that students are going to be critical of the author's choices, then you need to make sure that you're constructing lessons that will teach that, while also adhering to the requirements of the assessment. So step 1, skills and content you want students to know at the end of the unit. In step 2, we ask what links can we make to the Australian curriculum in English? Now in the workshop, most people had although this unit here is designed for Year 9, in the workshop most people had access to Year 7 curriculum. So we're just going to use that in this example. So we go to the curriculum, and we go to the content descriptors, and we say, well, which of the content descriptors does this unit teach? So let's have a look. How about this one here? Understand how language is used to evaluate texts and how evaluations about a text can be substantiated by reference to the text and other sources. That fits perfectly with the critical analysis. In that critical analysis, students will be evaluating the text. Their evaluations will be substantiated by reference to the text. So I would write that down. Let's just copy and paste. So links to curriculum. Okay, what else is in here? Let's have a read. There are lots of them. I mean, this one here could work. The language features of informative and persuasive text, again linking to the assessment. I'll just go down a little bit. Okay, analyse how point of view is generated in visual texts. That is absolutely perfect when we're talking about a picture book and we're talking about representations, which implies looking at the author's point of view. This one would definitely link. Down in responding to literature. Reflect on ideas and opinions about characters and so on, justifying point of view. Okay, so remember that for your assessment, you're finding around about 5 content descriptors for each strand. So 5 for language, 5 for literature, and 5 for literacy. So you're going to have around about 15 content descriptors. So you just make a list of those. Okay, so now we've got in mind what we need to teach our students and how that kind of stuff links to the curriculum. And there's a little bit of a dialogue between those two. You kind of go back and forth, and that will help you to understand what you need to put into the unit. what I mean is that when you read some of the content descriptors, you might think, yeah, that's something else that I need to teach, or that's a more nuanced way to teach that idea. So they work together. Step 3, what learning experiences and resources can you design to help students learn? And I've got down here to remember to include formative assessment and giving feedback along the way. There's a man called Hattie, I think his name's John Hattie. He's done a lot of research on what actually affects students' results. And he's found that teacher feedback is the biggest thing that we can do to make an impact on student results. There are lots of things that we can't have an impact on, we can't have an effect on, like their parent literacy levels, how many books they have in their home, that kind of thing. But the best thing that we can do is give feedback. So when you're planning your learning experiences and lessons, you need to be thinking about little activities that you can put in along the way to assess how students are tracking. And you can let them know how they're going. I always ask 3 questions. How are you going? How do you know? And how can you do better? So I should be able to go into your class and ask a student, how are you going with this unit? How do you know how you're going? And what do you need to do to improve? That's a bit of an aside. The main point here is that next step you make a list of the kinds of activities and resources. So for example, in this unit, I would recommend using a board, Piggy Book. Now I'll just pull it up on here. So I won't play the whole thing, but I'll talk through it briefly. So we've got a nuclear family here with mum, dad, and the 2 boys. I mean, even here, if we're talking about symbolism, looking and visual literacy, looking at her facial expression, looking at the fact that there are the 3 of them on mum's back. So what happens throughout the story is that we've got mum who's doing all of the housework and the rest of the family is quite lazy. Poor mum, she has to do all of the housework and then she goes to work. She made all the beds, vacuumed all the carpets, and then she went to work. And then in the afternoon, they came home, were still being lazy. Poor mum, she had to do the ironing, do the washing, cook the dinner. And then the boys are there like that. But as the book progresses, the rest of the family starts to transform into pigs. And again, look at the amazing symbolism. He's got a little badge, which is actually a pig's nose. Even if you look at the light switch, he's got a little trotter there. Even, I don't know if you can see, eventually the wallpaper turns into, yeah, I think it might be it there. The wallpaper turns into pigs, pictures of pigs. So the boys start to, and mum leaves, she goes away. So the boys start to clean up for themselves after feeling very sorry for themselves and everything getting very messy. And then Mrs. Pigott walked in. And they beg her to come back. And she does, but now the boys contribute more. And mum was happy too. On the next page. She mended the car. So that's a book called Piggy Book by Anthony Brown. And that will be a perfect parent text for this unit of work. So we were looking at the learning experiences. So you could do so many activities with one particular picture book. I mean, that's the resource. So what kinds of activities could we do? Learning experiences. We could do so many activities in terms of introductions to representation. Okay, and there are lots of activities that you can find that will introduce the idea of representation, how one thing stands for another. You could look at multiple interpretations or readings of a text, okay? You could use the inkblot pictures. Text differently. Okay, so you're just writing down activities that you could do. You could do a deconstruction of a picture book. You could look at things like the colour, settings, symbols. And then we could look at dominant readings of a book. And we could ask, I don't know, do an analysis of the images alone. There are also, and I'm going to put an extract of this unit plan under assessment. It is okay, so you can see some of the activities that were designed in this unit of work. So you go through, you add in the learning experiences. You just and start by doing a brainstorm. And now step 4. It's the last step. You need to sequence these learning experiences in the unit. Now there are 3 phases of a unit of work. There's orientating, that's the first one. That's where we say to the kids, what do you already know about picture books? What do you already know about representation or symbolism? What do you know about how families can be typically represented in texts? You can give them an advanced organizer or a learning map, sort of like a graphic organizer, to show them what they're going to be covering in the unit. Okay, that really can help. Particularly, that's a really great differentiation strategy to help students understand what's coming next. And just give them a bit of an introduction. You might have a really fun text to start the unit off with. That might go for, say, 3 or 4 lessons. Next, you look at the enhancing phase. And that's where you consolidate the learning, your scaffolding opportunities for independent practice. That's where you're doing lots of modelling, lots of guided practice, and guiding them towards being able to do things independently. So analyse the text independently, identify the representations on their own. And then the last few lessons of a unit are synthesizing, and that's where you do the higher order thinking skills, extended tasks, working with new things, really challenging them, and also completing the assessment piece. So you have a look at the learning experiences. You should have a really vast range of learning experiences brainstormed. And now you just sequence them. You think, okay, well, what needs to come first? What needs to come second? What do I need to do before I can teach that? And by the end of that process, you should be able to see a really nice string between across your unit plan that leads to the assessment piece. So give them opportunities to practice the assessment piece. Model how to do the assessment piece. Do an example on Piggy Book. Annotate that example. So identify the structure of it. Okay, now your further practice for this. In the week 2 activities, activity 4 is similar to this. Okay, there's a unit overview there, and there are these 7 questions. It asks you to go away and do a little bit of research. Post your responses in Wiki 2.0, and all responses that are there by the end of next Monday, I'll do a recording of some feedback. So I hope that this has helped you understand the process that we take when we're designing a unit of work. Okay, so to recap, we brainstorm the skills and content that we need to teach, how that stuff links to the curriculum, what learning experiences I need to teach, and then I sequence those learning experiences, so what comes first, second, third, and so on. I hope this helps. Please keep emailing your questions. I'm very happy to help.